Hello, excuse me. Hello, wherever you are. We're trying to gather a group together, the gals who have children and are working and can't make ends meet. We want you to call in and tell us how much money you have, how much of a budget you would need if you lived in a stereotypical 1950s world where you had a husband and a wife, you were the wife, and you had a three-bedroom brick house and you had a couple of children to take care of. What would that budget be? And if you're a guy, to start calling in and ask, how many hours do you have to work in order to come up with that budget? I promise you it'll be more than 40 hours. And so, hello, if you're in Australia, I guess it's 9 o'clock in the morning there. It's 4 o'clock in Saturday afternoon here in Tucson, which is where it's being broadcast from. And it's 7 o'clock in New York. And the whole idea is to go back to home economics. And so let's review a few things. In the 1950s, the communists said they would come out and overthrow the United States and a few other places by about 1973. And that's when there was an upheaval in our society. We went from home economics to individual rights. And in psychology, they threw out the idea of original sin. Both the Catholic and the communists define mental illness as a normal taken into the abnormal. And the Catholics say, hold on, go backwards here. From a cold to the flu to pneumonia, and they go back from pneumonia back to a cold, back to the flu. The normal is normal for a human being, but not good enough. And sex is the easiest thing. If you're sit in a chair and fantasize about sex until you become aroused, then do it again, only this time you fantasize about actually getting the gal pregnant. And you realize that's not a natural thing at all by any stretch of the imagination. And now you understand what original sin is. To deliberately take that into account, to will the good of another person, and you do it because Christ rose on the third day. It's actually famous philosophical stuff. And it's those three things that make up God and country. And so you become a well-adjusted person. And you become, if you choose a wife and a wife and then a good mother and a husband and a good father, and then it clicks in and becomes home economics. You live in a detached house. You go off to the side and start with farming and mining, and then above that, manufacturing, and above that, wholesale, retail, and repair, and above that, retirement, education, and recreation. And doctors and lawyers become a kind of lattice that holds it all together. And it's the Pope is the priest that causes it all to come into being to begin with. It's a Catholic thing. It's a religious thing. And so you're sitting there. This is what they all threw out in the 1970s, and it just got worse and worse. And now you're sitting there in dire straits. You can hear them on YouTube. The one gal I make reference to on the other videos, she's in her closet because her toddler is. She doesn't want to wake her toddler up, and they share a room. And she just says, "I can't do this anymore." And she can't do it. It's impossible. It's physically impossible. 10-year-olds can't pay for their moms. Moms can't take care of the kids and go out and work. And the idea that is a job, it's actually a profession. And so the two click in and they, in a very real way, become one person. And so you call it home economics. You take it from there. Home economics is the smallest economic thing. It's a building block, and and that's the one that gets everybody out of poverty and into plenty. They threw that out in favor of individual rights. They had a chance in our society to either get onto a maintenance level. There was so much wealth, they reached a fork in the road, and they could either get onto a maintenance level and then raise the bar for everybody, or they could have cashed in on it all, moved into the foothills, and become the upper class in a peasant and property class society, individual rights. And that's what they did. And you're paying the price for it. The lazy V, just like this. And so to get things out, in psychology, they threw out, they made a big deal about homosexuality in the 1970s. Homosexuality is no longer a mental illness. And the bum's rush was they threw out the idea of being normal and well-adjusted. It's not a natural thing. And so they started to call that mental illness. And then willing the good of another person and doing it because of that little computer cloud of stuff that you hold as faith. And then it kicks in, and those three things that make up God and country. So in psychology, they threw out the idea of original sin. In courts, they threw out the idea that you can't have religion in government. And when they did that, they adopted the stereotypical scholastic philosophy definition of evil. So they did adopt religion, they just adopted the other side. And with it, those things that are of the other side, which is a judicial court, a court that will establish facts that are true as true. And the idea of making money by making somebody else better off. The leadership style of washing the feet of the apostles turns into a normal supply and demand curve, turns into making money by making people better off. And they threw that out in favor of making money by causing other people to have to work more hours. And that's how you ended up in the gutter, in trouble. And let's see, in economics, they threw out home economics. And in the political, that is the political, isn't it? And so you're paying a terrible price. So I was hoping to gather a group together. Actually, something to do about this. It's a 4-step process. But the first step is to get a group. You have to stand up for yourself. This is one time that you have to take a step back and sort of pull yourself out of everything. Grab your 3-cornered hat and pipe and drum, and however you do it in Brisbane, Australia. And then you have to speak up. Enough. I get into the character of a responsible adult. I'm a Yank. I'm a citizen of the United States, as opposed to people who are malicious, a bunch of queer scoundrels. Excuse me, I drifted. You go back over here and you become a normal person, and that's you. And then you have to speak up and say, look, I need a budget here. I have the credit card. You go, hubby, and you go and come across with some budget so I can use. And the only way that's going to happen is if you hear this and you start to speak up. And if you're a guy, you ask how many hours do you have to work in order to come up with that budget? In my school days, it was always the proverbial plumber. And as it stands now, I think it's going on 4 times as much. But don't hold me quite to the numbers, but it's far more than 40 hours a week. You would have to work in order to live the same lifestyle that you would if this was 1973. This house is the house I grew up in. And our dad was a repairman. And this is a 3-bedroom brick house in a half-acre lot. And next door was a plumber, and 2 doors down was a milkman, if you know what that is. And up the street was a guy who worked in a feed store. And you get the idea, the same people who built the houses lived in the houses. And that was all thrown out. If you walk around the neighborhood now, this is by the University of Arizona, and you could see it all change. They would start buying houses for their children, the rich people, and then they would go to school, and then when the kids graduated, they would sell the house. And the very act of doing that causes houses for everybody else to go up. And so they could sell the house and make money. They're the ones that caused the houses to go up. And then they started going, well, from a cold to the flu to pneumonia. And they started to buy a house and rent it out, and then rent it out to as many people as they could get in there. Then they started to put trailers in maybe a small house in the backyard. And then they started to build these huge houses, quote unquote, with 7 bedrooms and in lots around here. And you could see a slum being built. That slum is straight out of my school days from the, I won't tell you when. And they did it, and nobody could stop them. Nobody could go to court and stop them. and nobody could stop them in the end because you couldn't shove your religion down their throats. And so that's enough of that. So we have a plan. We know just what to do, just what's wrong, just what to do about it, and just how to do it. It all depends on you. Excuse me. And so I'm hoping to get a group together. If you're in England, they do so much censoring now, I'm not even sure this would get through. But if you're in a group like a place like Tollesbury, England, ask yourself, well, what's the budget? And it's the same thing if you're here in Tucson. It's the same thing if you're in Australia. It should be the same thing if you're in Mexico, but the Mexican government is so Marxist, and they have this very distinct peasant and property class society. This is Tucson's right near the border. And they had this vicious revolution in the 20s, a communist revolution. And they had a small group of exceedingly sickly rich people and a huge gap. And then all this devastating poverty, even though there was beautiful country and plenty of oceans and fresh water and everything. And nothing's changed. You see all the people trying to come across the border, and you wonder why. And now the United States is becoming just like that. And you have to wonder why as well, because they know all of this stuff, and all these professors are so Marxist or so communist. The idea at the very largest scale was to push us into a consumption society in the 1970s so that we would fall apart and destroy as a society, and people would starve, and then they would come in and take over. And it looks like so far they're right on schedule. You can stop that. You better stop that. The only way that you're going to get around it is if you're stand up to the people behind your back. If you're a gal, you're going to have to stand up to the women's liberation movement. If you're a guy, you're going to have to stand up. If you're a plumber, you're going to have to stand up to the plumbers union. If you're a policeman, you're going to have to stand up to the policemen's union. And to think that it might be the police on one side and the teachers are on the other, no, it doesn't work that way. I have quite a bone to pick with some of the FOP, the Fraternal Order of Police, and that sort of thing around here. And it doesn't make one bit of difference. You could be a black gal, and the category of gal, if you're a gal and you're beside yourself because you have children and you have no budget to go out and spend it on. And there's an example. If you have a category of women, you're going to have to stand up to the women's liberation movement. If you have the category of a black person, you're going to have to stand up to the black civil rights movement. If you take a step back and look, you'll realize they're the same group. In Chicago, they had elections, and there was an election, and it was a fight between the teachers union and the police union, and nonsense. You take a step back and you take those unions and you put them over there. They hustle, con, manipulate, and intimidate. They couldn't care less. They're on the same group, and you're over here. You're the one that's starving. And so you have a shuffling around. You rearrange categories. You put things back along the classic battle of good and evil. The priest and the pimp. The priest says, say what you mean what you say. Everything else comes from the evil one. And then there's a flip-flop, and it goes out to the other side, and there's a pimp. And the pimp knows how to manipulate, intimidate, hustle, and con. And in this culture, he's the bad guy. Just to get things out, if you happen to be listening to this in Great Britain or one of those places, here in the United States, judges wear black robes because Catholic priests 500 years ago in England wore black robes. And they were good at it. All this business about the priest and the pimp, the idea of people that would separate the act of sex from the act of getting the gal pregnant and get the normal taken into the abdomen. It's called malice. And look, that's what malice is. And you add fear to that, and you add just sheer violence, your environment changes your attitude, and you have to be taught that. And there's a famous phrase: what takes away your free will? Fear, sex, ignorance, and violence. And the Brits had this down. They had famous books, Stonewaller, Stone something, Blackstone. That's it. And they threw it all out. And now to listen to them on the computer, they're horrible. Those poor guys are in dire straits as well. But you'll change that, right? Here in the United States, just because they had a revolution, we had a revolution in the 70s. Houses went up as much as $2,000 a month is one of the ways I see it. They didn't roll in with tanks, but they did throw bombs in the streets. And they did change our society just as if the military came in. And so that was the act of treason. When courts came in and said, we decided there would be no God and no religion in government, that was the fundamental act of treason. They threw out God, they threw out being a citizen, and they threw out willing the good of another person. And they institutionalized taking the normal into the abnormal and pulling a bum's rush, making money by causing poverty, being the professional consumer. You take $1 and you go to Japan at the time, you give them a piece of paper, they give you a stereo, you own it, and well, look, fancy you. And that only works for about a generation, and then society collapses. Excuse me again. So we're hoping that someone will hear this and start chiming in the chat. How many hours do you work? What do I need? What's the budget? In Tucson, it's for a girl with one boy, little girl. It's about $1,600 a month for a one-bedroom apartment that's livable. Anything less is just something you wouldn't want a toddler to live in. And it's about $900 a month for daycare to watch somebody else raise your child, because that's what the women's liberation movement decided you wanted to do. And it just goes on there. The cheapest car you could get is a couple $100 a month, and car insurance is outrageous. Health insurance is, by the time you start adding things up, it so quickly passes. I used an example and went and looked around, and I used a $50,000 a year income, which is a lot higher than most of the gals make. In other words, it doesn't work out. It just isn't. And they know that. And it just keeps getting worse. They haven't stopped yet. So it's going to be up to you. I have to add something else I just heard. I was listening to people on the computer, and there's an anecdote on YouTube where the Harvard professor is talking about neglect for children. He's the Harvard School of Child Development, and he's talking about he's being the hero, talking about how to deal with neglect of children. You're joking. I have some age on me, Bob. It was Harvard and Yale and those professors that threw all that out in the 60s and 70s. They're literally the ones that caused all this. You were a pig if you were a guy and tried to try to come up with bicycles for the kid, and you were a common oppressed housewife. You're supposed to go out there and get in the workplace, and then a few years later, well, you had to take time out to have a child and let somebody else do the work. It's so silly, it's absurd. And by the way, while we're on the subject, where are the psychologists? Where are the personality profilers when it comes to all these people? That psychologist should have been out in the street screaming his head off, saying, look what we did. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. The United States had the ideal society going right out of Aristotle and Socrates and those things, we had a sense of love in our society. You were a good person, and then you were the ideal person, the ideal mom, and it was working. You could start off as an apprentice plumber and get married and get into a starter's house, and you would have been considered in a bit of poverty or just starting out. Those days are long gone. People dream of getting into those houses now. It's just not going to work. Perhaps that university professor can give up his tenure and give up his the few extra apartments they buy to rent out to get extra income and everything else, and they can go and they can get a garbage sack. They can go form a class of poverty beneath a class of peasantry that they cost. They can keep their mouths quiet about it. A few other things. Remember, there is all this stuff comes out of the Catholic Church. And there was about 250,000 nuns that poured out of the seminaries between the 60 and 70 censuses that St. Thomas saw. And the majority were teachers, and the guys as well, the brothers of the Christian schools and all that stuff. They were pushed out of society along with the 1950s mom and dad, our society and our culture. There are words for that, and one of the words is treason. They got away with it. Didn't mean it was legal. Well, let's go back to you. If you're listening to this, and if you would, start chiming in. This is what I have to work with. This is what I do now. This is how much money I have. This is how much my bills are. And then if you could, maybe you're a college student and you see a house from the 1950s or so, and it's for sale, and you can walk through it. And just, I wouldn't trust government statistics at all, so just don't trust them. And then just tell yourself, I've got 2 kids and a husband. How much do I need to get the shop going? How big of a living room should it be? How many 10 by 12 foot bedroom that holds two boys, 2 girls, a backyard, something to get everybody out of poverty and into feeling that sense of comfortableness. And if you're a guy or a gal, or a single guy who's a condo, here you don't rent property to other people. You don't rent property from other people. You make money by putting someone else in their own business. Well, we'll call it a day. We'll be on the air again at 9 o'clock tomorrow, Los Angeles time, 9 o'clock Sunday, Los Angeles time, which would be, I think, in the middle of the night for you if you're in Australia. It'll be in the afternoon if you're in Great Britain. And I hope if you're hearing this and you're in St. Louis or New York or Mexico or one of the, you chime in and let us know. If you can do that, if you can, well, let's put it, if this all ends up a Catholic thing. So picture yourself going to a Catholic mass in Mexico or the Ukraine or Russia or the Philippines or St. Louis. It's all the same. You're expected to be a normal, well-adjusted Joe, and the mass is the same everywhere. And then you turn around and you head out. And as you head out, the gals and guys are the same. And then just like Disneyland, St. Louis would probably look like St. Louis in Mexico, like Mexico and the Philippines. And just like Disneyland, it would all work out to bring Christ to the world. You end up sounding religious, it's because you have to. I'm a Yank. I'm a Catholic in the pews. I'm a Yank. I'm just a normal average Joe with a citizenry of normal Joes. And then it's home economics. And then we can go to work. Well, thank you. I hope you pass the word, and we'll see you.